Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
The most pristine water source in the United States can be found at an undisclosed location in the Appalachian mountain range. In addition to the best water, the region also boasts the purest soil and the cleanest air in North America. In fact, it possesses the notable distinction of being the only significant geographic area completely free of microplastics, PFS, and other anthropological contaminants that currently pose significant environmental concern. This distinction is all the more astonishing given that it was acquired practically overnight. Prior to this sudden reversal, the area suffered some of the worst environmental pollution and contamination in the United States due to factors such coal mining, logging, natural gas extraction, and industrial scale farming of livestock. Understandably, the area has been the subject of intense study for several years. The scrutiny turned up another less savory fact. By population, this region has one of the highest missing persons rates on the North American continent. The region is plagued by a steady stream of disappearances. Those who go missing are typically, although not always, young adults between the ages of 16 to 22, although some were as old as 38 and others as young as 9. The age range partially explains why these missing persons were never investigated fully, because authorities assumed these young people simply left to pursue better opportunities elsewhere. The lack of attention even extended to the younger victims. Typically, the younger children were simply dismissed as runaways. In 2018, an environmental scientist accidentally encountered the region's astonishing test results and decided to pursue study. The goal of her research was discovery of the factor that had purified the area's natural resources and replication of this factor for broader application. To say she encountered immediate roadblocks is an understatement. The population was and remains hostile to newcomers. The researcher experienced sabotage, including vehicular damage, equipment sabotage, and personal injury. Rather than abandon her research, she became more determined and decided to bypass the adults and directly question students at the regional school. The children she interviewed spoke of a local folk hero called the Swan King who delivered bountiful harvests, healthy livestock, and sometimes even left chests of gold and toys for people who pleased him. If a child was particularly good and worthy, the Swan King would introduce himself in dramatic fashion. If the child did not flee from him, he would whisk the child away to his homeland, a beautiful kingdom called Aristyra. The researcher learned that this folk hero and tales of his generosity towards local families predated European settlement of the area. The farther one went back, the darker the tales became. Her studies soon revealed that the Swan King was much more than a folk tale. In simplest terms, she learned that the local population not only worshipped this entity, but engaged in human sacrifice to appease it. The ringleader of this cult was an older woman named Darkus. The researcher correctly deduced the time, dates, and location of the next sacrifice. She managed to capture cell phone footage of the ritual. Unfortunately, she was caught, but not before she hid her cell phone. Following an anonymous tip 2 days later, her remains were discovered by authorities. There wasn't much to find as her hair, eyes, tongue, and vital organs had been removed. The body itself had been subjected to thorough exsanguination. The cell phone was recovered along with the footage. Local authorities swiftly marked it for destruction. However, the officer tasked with its destruction suffered a fit of conscience and instead brought the phone home with him. This caused a sequence of events that ended with T-Class Agent Love successfully recovering the phone and bringing it to the Agency of Helping Hands. The footage is highly disturbing, so a full description will not be provided. In brief, however, it depicts the savage homicide of a known missing person at the hands of a tall, clearly inhuman entity with enormous white wings. The being ends the ritual by cutting the victim's throat and draining it into a river while dozens of people look on, chanting at regular intervals. The agency successfully located the entity. It is accurate to say he did not go down without a fight. Upon his eventual incarceration, the inmate introduced himself as both Prince Thyalor of Aristyra and the Swan King. He completed this introduction by insisting that personnel call him simply Laura. From what personnel can determine, Aristyra is analogous to what is popularly termed fairyland, fairy, elfland, Ireland, and so forth. Lore possesses many spectacular abilities, the most marvelous of which is his ability to purify natural resources such as rivers, soil, groundwater, and air by removing all particulate matter. But purification is not instantaneous, nor is it done freely. The process requires blood sacrifice, the frequency, number, and brutality of which is directly proportionate to the size of the area being cleansed. It should be noted that even the small geographic area Lore routinely purified prior to his capture required several victims per decade. Agency officials have considered leasing Lore's services to world governments to mitigate issues such as ocean pollution and dangerous air quality. However, given the catastrophic exchange of human life that a large-scale environmental cleansing would require, these plans are currently on hold for the foreseeable future. Lore presents as an adult human male of approximately 6 feet 0 inches, with black eyes, large white wings, extraordinarily pale skin, and hair a particularly vibrant shade of coppery orange. He is objectively attractive to the point of distraction, an effect he seems to exert upon all personnel regardless of individual preference or orientation. In the recent past, Lore has used his exceptional appeal and charm to manipulate staff to disastrous effect. Personnel are therefore advised to be on their guard at all times when working with Lore and to never be alone with him. Interview subject: the Swan King. Classification string: uncooperative / destructible / Olympic / constant / moderate / demon. Interviewer: Rachela B. Interview date: November 30th, 2024. My existence is a covenant. This covenant takes the form of a game. The game begins with hiding. You do not choose your hiding place, your brothers choose it for you. The choice is not based on strength or merit, but on hierarchy. I was lowest in our hierarchy, so I was given the worst hiding place. That was simply the order of things. They hid me under a rotting roller coaster in a theme park that had already been dead far longer than it ever been alive. But the park was not the point. The place was the point. That place is a gateway. You might say it's magic. You have no hope of passing through the gate without one of us leading the way, but you still understand what the place is in your core. That is why you built the park there, why you brought your own magic to it, to correct this discrepancy between what your eyes saw and your heart knew. The rust from the roller coaster made me deathly ill. That is why my brothers hid me there. They chose that place to trap me, to make it impossible for me to find enough game pieces, or any game piece at all, in time to train it for our game. Please understand that nothing in that park could actually kill me, but everything in it could hurt me, and did. As a result, I was very weak. So weak I had no hope of leaving it until the game began. As I told you, this diminished my chances of finding game pieces in time to train them. This was simply the way of things. I was similarly hobbled by my brothers in every game. It was our established order. But chaos is anathema to order, and chaos intervened on my behalf. That chaos came in the form of a girl named Darkus. Love is not always chaos, but nothing engenders chaos like love. That night was chaos incarnate. Rain like shimmering starry curtains, thunder that shook earth and air alike, lightning that split the sky and erased the dark, winds that howled like a grief-mad god. Had my brothers not hidden me in the utility room under the roller coaster, I might have drowned. Darkus only found me because she sought shelter from the rain. I learned later that she was only in the rain because she was running from someone. Even the circumstances seemed chaotic now. A young girl running from beast, only to find refuge in the arms of a monster. Who expects such a thing outside of a fairy tale? She was afraid of me at first. They all are. Most of them flee. This is desirable. You want the cowards to flee as soon as possible because it proves that they are not suitable game pieces. Darkus stayed. I can still see her as I first saw her. Rainwater dripping down her face, cutting channels through her makeup alongside her tears and sweat. Her coat drenched, smelling of cigarettes and mildew and despair. The stench still burns my eyes. But to remember her this way makes me smile. I did not smile at her then. I begged her for help. That is the next move in the game, to beg. To transform your power into powerlessness. I looked powerless indeed. I couldn't even move on my own because I was bound, wrapped in warded cloth and tied with steel cords. I made my voice pathetic and frightened. She hurried to me, nearly tripping in her oversized shoes, and wrestled me out of my restraints. She unwound my wrappings and saw the wards inked on them. What is this? Is that blood? Please, I begged, please help me with my face, just so I can breathe. She pulled the cloth away from my face. When she saw what lay underneath, she almost ran. After the initial shock, and it was a shock because we make sure we anything but beautiful at the beginning of the game, she asked, "What are you?" "What, not who. You won't believe me. Try me." I told her lies. Lies are crucial to the game. Lies to charm, to trick, to draw in. I lied about who I was, what I had done, and what I planned to do. I lied about what was being done to me. I lied that I was hiding from my brothers who sought to kill me, and I lied that I was hopeless and helpless and lost. "I need your help." I made my voice break. "I can't do this by myself." I did not enjoy the concern in her eyes. In truth, I did not enjoy this game at all. But enjoyment is not the aim. The aim is only power. Every intelligent creature plays games. You play your games with pieces. My brothers and I are rather more intelligent than the rest of you, so we played our games with people. We were not cruel, or at least we weren't cruel for cruelty's sake. We paid for the game pieces, or rather the loser paid. I always lost, so I always paid. I paid for all of the game pieces, mine and my brothers, with harvest, livestock, even gold. Later on I paid gemstones and money. The better the game, the better the prize. These prizes were meaningless to me, true. They were nothing, less than nothing. But these things meant something to you, so I gave them. Prosperity in exchange for blood. This way, everyone wins our games. Well, everyone except the players. But that is the way of it. An exchange. Gain for sacrifice. Death for life. I did not tell Darkus any of what I'm telling you because truth is not part of the game. Even so, she sensed my lies. This made my work very difficult. Overcoming your game piece's natural reactions is part of the game. Breaking down their fear, peeling away their own survival instincts until they ignore everything their senses scream at them for love of you, bonding with them, building trust. They must trust you. Trust is the only way they will follow you into Aristira. No matter what I did, Darkus would not trust me. But even though she did not trust me, she could not stay away from me. This was no significant feat, however. None of you can stay away from magic. To be fair, neither can I. We simply have different definitions of what constitutes magic. Although she did not trust me, she took care of me. I admit her ministrations were welcome. As I told you, the rust overhead and the iron all around had made me very ill indeed. I did not trust that she would help me for them. Even now, I am not entirely sure that she wanted to. Every time she left me, I saw the hesitation in her face, and I believed that she would not come back. Instead of moving on, instead of giving her up for lost and waiting for a new game piece to come along, I always felt a lance of fear, bright and hateful. I hated her for being afraid. I hated her for knowing she didn't want to come back to me. That hate always died when she returned. She always returned with fresh clothing, bedding, and blackberries. Blackberries grew wild throughout the park. I was too weak to gather them myself. She gathered them for me and fed them to me one by one, until I told her I was strong enough to feed myself. Over the following days, I continued to build her trust. I told her things, both true and untrue, about myself. I told her entirely true things about Aristira. That is important. They must know that Aristira is beautiful beyond compare, or they will never follow you. In return, she told me things too. She told me of herself and her family, the poverty in which they lived, the exploitation and consequences thereof that they could not escape. She told me of the children who lived around us, they who lived in fear of the disappearances and mutilations that had happened so regularly for so long. How every time they left their homes, or even when they were left alone within their homes, they feared death or something worse. How she herself had nightmares of being taken away or killed, murdered for some dark purpose. She told me of the land itself and what had been done to it by those in power. She told me of the poisoned water, how it flowed dark and foul from every faucet in the town. She told me of the contaminated aquifer, that ancient pristine lake defiled from the mines and the runoff of tortured livestock. She told me of the soil itself, tainted with poisons one can't even see, poisons that will live on long after the ground itself has died. She told me of the children who died in infancy because their mothers' wombs were poisoned, of children born sick and grown sicker with the years, of all the people who died too young, or simply young, because everything in them and around them had been poisoned. Over the course of those days, the balance of power shifted. I was no longer earning her trust. She was earning mine. There, under the roller coaster as rust burned my throat and fireflies drifted through moon blue grass, I knew that I desperately wanted to help her, only there was no help for her. There is no help for game pieces, only victory or death. I understood the game. I understood it enough to already know Darkus would not have victory. While I couldn't help her, I decided I would least help her family, her town, her land. This time, the price paid for the game pieces would be purification, no harvests. Why, when any crop would be contaminated, no livestock. Why, when they were cruelly bred to such vast numbers that they destroyed the very land that sustained them. No money, no gemstones either. Only purification. Purification of the land would be the price the loser paid for the game pieces. And I was always the loser. But even this resolve failed me, for as the nights passed and the game drew near, I realized that I was falling in love with her. The essence of the covenant is sacrifice, death of few into the bounty of many. This transformation is the foundation of rebirth, but before rebirth comes destruction. The covenant demanded the destruction of the game pieces, but you cannot destroy what you love, or at least I couldn't. No sooner had this revelation dawned than she sensed it and asked, "What's really going on, Lore? What do you actually want from me? What are you really?" I told her, "If I tell you, you will hate me." She only said, "Try me." I tried her. First, I told her how everything I said of Aristyra was true, that it is a place of unparalleled wonder, of shining cloud cities and talking forest, unimaginable creatures and unimaginable beauty, how I was a prince, one of 9, the least of those 9 true, but a prince nonetheless. I have seen wonder in 10,000 faces. Her wonder, her face, is the only one that ever made my heart quicken, but her wonder gave way to fear as I told her other, more important truths. Truths about what I had done, and what I was, and what I could be, and what I was meant to be. Truths about what I did to people like her. How her eyes widened, pale in the dark. "Then what are you even doing down here?" "Because my brothers trapped me here. While no guarantee the prince with the most pieces typically wins, they put me here to make it harder for me to find any." "Why?" "Because of our hierarchy. I am the least among them. Not the least talented nor the weakest. Simply the least. Least regarded, least loved." "Why?" "Because of how I treat human beings." I could hear her heartbeat, quick and frightened, and so at odds with the curiosity in her face. "Is it because you were too cruel to us?" "Number, because I was too kind." "I don't understand," she said. "I don't want you to." Even though I did not want her to be afraid of me, I cannot help what I am and therefore not help but enjoy the fear itself. I felt my own smile as it split across my teeth. I saw it reflected in her eyes, feral and bright as a crescent moon. "I have to understand." I felt my smile die and I told her what I told you. "Then listen, my existence is a covenant. That covenant takes the form of a game. Every intelligent creature plays games. You people, you play your games with pieces. My brothers and I are rather more intelligent than the rest of you, and so we play our games with people." I told her about the games we play. I told her that my brothers and I are greater, older, and more powerful than she could imagine. Ancient, ageless, sliding back and forth through Aristyra, with nothing to distract us through our long years. Nothing but power that we hone and grow through our games and through people like her. My brothers use theirs like a weapon. Power for the sake of it. Power because it is simply power. Unlike my brothers, I understood that power comes with responsibility. This is a natural consequence of losing. I told her that my brothers do not pay for their pieces. I do because I never win. So I'm just your game piece. The disgust in her voice made my chest ache. "You don't need my help at all. I'm not special. I'm not the only one who can help you. You're not falling in love with me. You're just screwing with me so you can win the medal for most infatuated teenager after I skip happily along to your ritual human sacrifice." I would have believed everything was lost had she not been inching toward me with every word. I answered, "Yes, it was supposed to be that way. You were supposed to be a game piece." But was on my tongue. "But that has changed." Before I could say it, she said, "That seems like a waste." "How so?" You're the weakest prince, right? The others make sure you never win. They make sure you never win because they hate you. They hate you because they think you're weak, and they think you're weak because you have enough of a heart, or whatever it is you actually have, I don't know how your anatomy works, to pay restitution for your periodic mass murder ritual." I waited. "So if you're going to lose anyway, and if you're going to pay out for losing, why keep playing their game? Why don't you just make your own?" "What a wicked child you are." But I was smiling. "Chaos, as I told you, we took matters into our own hands. That is not how it is done. This violates order, and violation of order is a violation of our covenant. But this was a new covenant, and this was a very new game. Darkest brought the others to me one by one. Children trapped by circumstances, youth with no escape, people who found their well-being and their very lives sacrificed on the altar of profit at any cost. Victims of power. They were all afraid me. They all wanted to run, but Darkest kept them calm. They were fascinated by me and relieved and horrified in equal measure to learn the truth of the games. A few were darkly enchanted, others repulsed. All wanted to see Aristyra for themselves, and each and every one was willing to enter into a new covenant. So together we all played our new game. We entered Aristyra and marched directly into the Court of Miracles itself. My brothers were unhappy to see me there. They were even unhappier to see the number of game pieces I brought with me. For the first time I brought more pieces than all the rest of them, and the prince with the most players always wins. They were unhappiest of all to see Darkest. Even if I had not had more game pieces than all the rest, I believe I would have won because my brothers' pieces fought only for themselves. My pieces fought for us all. When we won, they uncrowned my brothers, leaving me to stand above them all. But I did not stand alone. My victors and I all stood together. That is how you exchange powerlessness for power. I killed my oldest brother to seal the gate to Aristyra, that the survivors there could not come through and punish me or break my new covenant. The seal still holds. I then killed my cruelest brother and used his body to seal our new covenant. Once sealed, I purified the river. I still remember the joy around me when the water ran clear for the first time in decades. Fierce, consuming, overpowering. And I still remember the smile on Darkest's face. Her smile was chaos incarnate. Now, that was not the end. It was simply the beginning. Covenants require renewal. My brother's blood held for many years, but it was never going to hold forever. Nothing holds forever aside from chaos. Every 7 years the covenant must be renewed. Purification for blood, life or death. When I entered into this new covenant, I lost no power. I gained more than I or any of my brothers ever had. Of course I use it. What you do with power is what separates men from animals and gods from monsters. What I have done with mine makes me no monster. When your monstrous mills defile the rivers, I cleanse the waters. When your industrial farms infected the ancient aquifers, I purge those vast hidden lakes. When your poisons and your particles and your chemicals infiltrated the ground, when they were taken up through the very roots of trees and flowers and crops, I purified the earth and everything growing from it. I helped you. I help you. It costs you, I know, but exchange is the nature of a covenant. Exchange is the nature of power itself. I see your distaste, I feel it. Yet this is your own doing. Your world is dying. You have inflicted mortal injury upon mortal injury upon mortal injury. I cannot change that, but I can, and I do, take death and turn it into life. That is why the place you stole me from has the cleanest water on your continent, why its soil remains pure, why pristine air remains such, because together my victors and I make it so. I have been asked if it is possible to transform this small act of purification into a greater one. The answer is yes. Sacrifice is, shall we say, scalable. The part of me that is a prince of Aristyra longs to exact that price from you, but the part of me that is the Swan King shudders at the idea. The scale of purification you seek would require a sacrifice beyond your comprehension. You think this isn't so, but trust me, you do not understand what it will cost. I will do it if you ask, because while I am a king, I am still a prince. Ask, and it will be done. But think very hard before you ask me. Think very, very hard. So, as if being scolded by an impossibly beautiful fairy prince for climate change wasn't bad enough, directly after the interview I was summoned to the Pantheon's one and only conference room for a training session with 2 other T-class agents. Charlie was there to wrangle the trainer. 3 guesses as to who that trainer was. The familiar bolt of terror Kristoff's presence never failed to elicit shot through me, but as usual I ignored it and took a seat. Kristoff looked at me for an uncomfortable moment, but for once he didn't pop off with something gross. You were with the elf prince. I unsuccessfully bit back a particularly stupid feeling smile. He grabbed Charlie's ice water and slid it across the table to me. Hey, Charlie snapped, she needs it more than you. When he opened his mouth and I saw that he had once again pulled all his teeth, I tamped down my disquiet and settled in. The subject of the training was the Harlequin and designed for people who haven't yet encountered him in the field. Kristoff has been on hand for every recapture, hence his trainer designation. There is not a lot I can tell you, you, he told us. This is because the Harlequin is chaos. Chaos is not predictable, but even chaos has patterns from time to time. The Harlequin has one pattern that is very important for you to recognize. He went around the table, setting a packet down in front of each of us like we were kids in school. When the Harlequin meets you, there is a chance that he will begin to quote a song at you. Look at your papers for examples. I scanned my packet, which consisted of several photocopied police reports. The first one dated back to 1944. According to the report, a tall red-headed man in stage makeup and a fur coat was arrested for public indecency. He was immensely uncooperative during booking. Rather than try to explain, here's the direct transcription of the report. Officer, sir, hold still. Suspect. Alright, stop what you're doing because I'm about to ruin the image and the style that you're used to. I look funny. Officer, the costume and makeup might be why. Suspect. But oh, I'm making money, see. Officer, well then maybe a nice fat fine will teach you a suspect. So oh world, I hope you're ready for me. Now gather round. I'm the new fool in town and my sound's laid down by the underground. I'll drink up all the Hennessy you got on your shelf, so just let me introduce myself. Officer, that's exactly what we've been trying to get you to. Suspect, my name is Humpty, pronounced with an umpty. Officer, Mr. Umpty, are you? Suspect, oh ladies, oh how I like to screw thee. Officer, sir. So anyway, the report continues on like this with an increasingly apoplectic cop trying to control an increasingly shrieky Harlequin, who abruptly cuts off at the end of the first chorus. The interview transcript ends and a dense incident report follows that I was too tired, stressed, and anxious to parse. So you're telling me, I said to Christoph, that this thing was quoting the Humpty dance at small town cops during World War II. It is one of his favorite songs. If it was 1944, how did he know? I don't know. He has quoted songs at me 15 years before they were released. Time does not carry the same restrictions for him as for us. Okay, well, I know he's your scariest monster, but that's kind of hilarious. No, actually, that is hilarious. It is hilarious. It was also hilarious after he finished and folded the cop into a human balloon animal. I processed this for a moment, then said, well, that's still kind of funny. And will it be funny if it happens to you? I guess not for me, but the rest of you. No one will laugh if the Harlequin turns you into a human balloon animal, not even me. I'm touched. That's good to start. Now let me know how you like to finish. Christoph, Charlie said sharply. The T-class agent on my left looked as revolted as I felt, which gave me a surge of courage. Okay, so once the Harlequin starts screaming song lyrics at you, is it a guarantee that you're getting balloon animaled or number? Now, Marine, it becomes a problem if he finishes the first verse in the chorus. Even then, it is only a half chance he will balloon animal you. The other half is he will decide he likes you. You don't want that to happen either, but speaking from experience, it is the better of the two. Oh, so the Harlequin likes you? Ask him when you talk, was the arch response. He will tell you everything, he does not shut up. Is there a way to stop him once he starts singing? Not that we know. So, the speaker was the T-class agent on my left, a young man I knew by sight but not name. The last thing we'll get before we die is a theater geek from hell-shrieking digital underground before folding us in half. Not in half, in knots. My mistake. Yes, it may happen. I cannot promise it won't. I can promise I will be with you and I will get between you and him. I do not think he will not tie me in knots. I don't know what else he will do to me or to you, but it will not be that. You are truly a comfort, I said. I can be much more than that. Once again, the T-class agent made a face that accurately reflected my feelings. I felt another surge of camaraderie. Christoph, Charlie said, this behavior is not in compliance with your treatment plan. With that, we continued with our surviving the Harlequin seminar. By the time it ended, I felt worse than ever. Before I could sink fully into the doldrums, however, the other T-class agent pulled me aside. Is Charlie gone? Good. Okay, first, Mikey Wingeride. He held out his hand. Yes, that Wingeride. I know you don't know me, but I need to talk to you right now. When did you meet him? Charlie? No, nobody cares about Charlie. Christoph? I don't know, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks, okay, that makes sense. Now look, you're going to hate this. I would hate this if I were you. I hate this for you. But trust me, the way to make him stop that stuff is to be really nice. As nice as you can. Treat him like he's family. The only family you've got. Dread, confusion, and more than a little anger came rolling on in. Do you know what he is? better than you do, and I'm not saying he's a good guy. I know what he did, I know what he does, but I also know what they've done to him here, and you have no idea. The best thing you could possibly do for yourself is try to undo some of it, and the only way is to make friends with a sadistic serial killer who likes to sexually harass me. Listen, just pay attention, we're all here. You're going to talk to each of us, right? Watch us in between, listen to us, listen to him. I know what he did, he repeated. I know what he does, but I promise he is the only one who gives a genuine crap about any of the inmates, including you. Even you? Especially me. Don't let the name fool you, don't let him fool you either. And with that, T-Class Agent Mikey Wingeride hurried away. Naturally, this conversation caused me to have many questions, concerns, and realizations, the most important of which is the growing suspicion that the Harlequin colluding mole Raphael Wingeride is looking for just might be his relative. The least important is that I have met 4 Wingerides. 3 of them, Raphael, Gabriella, and Mikey, appear to be named after archangels. And then you've got poor Charlie. Just Charlie. I guess it's true that nobody cares about him. For an hour, maybe 2 after I called the Vatican, I sat on the front steps of the house, staring into space. Father Felipe was nowhere to be seen. I figured that was for the best. He'd probably taken Father Anthony's advice and run back to his church. With any luck, he was sleeping. I sat shaking on the steps. I reeked of blood and worse. Of course, I thought through the horror I'd just witnessed. The thick air, the smell of exposed guts, the glee on Maya's face as she slurped up Father Anthony's intestines. But that wasn't what dominated my thoughts. I'd seen her, Sophia, just as clearly as if she were still alive, warm, and sitting beside me, teaching me to sew. Without question, she had been there. She had saved me. And so I must have made an odd sight when the priest sent by the Vatican arrived. I sat there covered in several people's blood, including my own, my fingers bleeding from my clumsy needlework, smiling like I'd just seen God himself. "So good to find you well, Father Matthew," said a tall, muscular priest with a thick gray beard. "I'm Father Tomas. This is my trainee, Father Anselmo." He gestured to a rail-thin, bald man with angular features beside him. "I thought I knew all of the exorcists working in the States," I said, still half dazed. He shook his head. "We are not ordinary exorcists," he explained. "We belong to a particular order, where discretion is of utmost importance. Still, we know rumors of our existence circulate. Perhaps you've heard of the Knights of St. Michael." I shook my head. "Good," he said. "We are only called upon in cases requiring certain non-traditional skills. Based on your call, the Vatican believes this may be one such case." Father Anselmo shot him a look, and I recognized it immediately. It was one I'd given Father Anthony a dozen times when we arrived at the home of some poor girl claiming to be possessed, but really just needed a few years of therapy, maybe some antipsychotic meds. "What?" I asked. "You don't believe me? What I saw?" "We're certain you saw something," said Father Tomas. "Whether you performed a common exorcism or encountered something greater remains in question." "Look at my clothes," I shouted, staggering to my feet. "Look at the blood on my hands. Smell me. Don't you smell it?" That's when I looked down at myself and realized I was clean. Not even a drop of blood decorated my robes. The only evidence of my encounter was a small scab on my index finger from where I'd pricked myself with the needle as I sewed Maya's mouth shut. I looked back at the house. Even the dark smeared window was clean now, with a gentle light shining out. Without another word, I ran back up the steps and opened the door. Inside, the house was pristine, almost unnaturally so. The blood was gone, the stink too. Somewhere, a vanilla candle was burning. Gentle music played on the speakers overhead. The girl, I said to no one in particular, and now I was running up the stairs 2 at a time again. I ran down the hall and burst into her room, half expecting to find her hanging from the ceiling by her feet, a mass of skin and sinew hanging from her mouth. Instead, I found her lying still, almost death-like in bed. She wore a spotless white dress, and her hair fell about her head on the pillow as if perfectly arranged strand by strand. She was beautiful now, no longer the creature of paper and bones I'd encountered hours earlier. The only evidence that anything had happened was the silver thread still in place, sealing her mouth shut. I heard the other priests approaching from behind me. "None of this is right," I said. "None of it was this way." "I believe you," said Father Tomas, putting a hand on my shoulder. We have seen stranger things. The devil can be exceptionally tidy when he chooses to be. Or could it be that Father Matthew elected to perform a wholly unnecessary surgery, said Father Anselmo, gesturing to the girl's lips. We can pray that such is the case for her sake, said Father Thomas. In the meantime, we will proceed as if this is a true lieutenant of hell, likely of the third circle. I gave him a look. There were no such things as circles of hell in the canon. Gluttony, asked Father Anselmo, incredulous. I thought they were supposed to be fat. Father Tomas shook his head. Remember your Aquinas, he said. Gluttony takes 5 forms. Laute, too luxurious. Studios, too elaborate. Nemes, too large a quantity. Pre propere, eating at the wrong time. Ardenter, eating too fast. A glutton may be any size. I could tell Father Anselmo wanted to argue, but he was the trainee after all, and it wasn't becoming to argue, especially in front of a stranger. He bit his tongue. Very well then, said Father Thomas. Then we shall proceed. Prepare bindings of cloth soaked in holy water. Wrap her once at the shoulders, once at the wrists, once at the ankles. Father Matthew, if you are feeling up to the task, another set of hands would be useful, especially since time can be a factor in some cases. We will want to get her back to the Vatican as soon as possible before... As he spoke, I saw a hint of movement coming from the girl's direction. Glancing over, I saw something thick and black peek its head from between the 2 middle stitches of the mouth where the gap was greatest. It could have been a worm, a tongue, a snake, a centipede. Before I could get a good look, it pulled back inside. I helped Father Anselmo prepare the bindings, though I could tell he would have rather done the job himself. They brought holy water in some kind of red-brown earthenware jar that I hadn't seen before. We soaked 3 long strips of cloth and bound the girl, who didn't stir once. Though I had never heard of such a protocol before, the process made sense. 3 bindings representing the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit uniting to bind the demon. 2 hours later, we were on a private plane bound for Rome. The aircraft was luxurious by any standard, with plush white leather chairs emblazoned with the flaming sword of Saint Michael in delicate black embroidery. 2 pilots sat up front through a security door that looked extra thick. They made a point of letting me know they were both well armed. Of course, I wondered why such levels of protection were necessary, but I just nodded as if this was all perfectly normal. Enjoying the accommodations? Asked Father Anselmo. Father Thomas had drifted off at takeoff, snoring loudly. Maya lay nearby in a seat they'd reclined to dorm a bed. Father Anthony and I flew coach if we flew at all, I said. Usually we drove. He scoffed. I suppose you think yourself superior because of your humility. I never said any such thing, I said, but he was right. You didn't need to, he said with a sneer. He cracked his knuckles and then scratched furiously at the back of his head. You only reveal your own ignorance. We, the Knights of St. Michael, are the very sort of God. One does not enter the battlefield on bended knee, supplicating to his opponent. He comes out in armor of gold, wielding a sword of fire, striking fear into the hearts of the demons. Now it was my turn to laugh. So the leather seats, that's the modern day equivalent of a flaming sword. I'm sure they terrify the devil. Father Anselmo stood and stretched. He itched at his scalp again furiously. I read about you on the way over, he said. A convert, widowed. You wear the robes, but you're different than those of us who grew up in the faith, who never knew a woman's touch. Before, I'd been slightly annoyed at Father Anselmo. Now, at the mention of my wife, I felt my blood rising. God comes to us all at different times, I said quietly, but my hands were balled into fists. Save it for the flock, he said. We're all priests here. We should speak honestly. You and I, we're not the same. When my wife was in high school, she had a terrible boyfriend. He was an honor student and a top athlete, popular, beloved. No one would have suspected the pain he inflicted on her in private. Even when we started dating, 10 years later, she couldn't describe what he'd done to her physically, in the dark of night one summer alone in his family's cabin. No one for miles around, a fact he whispered to her over and over. All she would say is that a few days later, after praying the pain would go away on its own, that she'd driven herself to the doctor, who gave her stitches and promised not to tell her parents. Somehow, even after what he'd done, she couldn't break up with him. They continued dating through prom, even into the summer after senior year. She tried not to be alone with him, but it was futile. He hurt her again and again. When they finally broke up, there was no big confrontation. It was just the standard ending where they both went to college and drifted apart, eventually realizing they were no longer a couple. uncle. When they saw each other on holiday breaks, they acted friendly, even though his presence was enough to send her into a panic. After hearing the story, it occurred to me that I might have a moral obligation to find this man and hurt him as badly as he'd hurt her, maybe to kill him, partly to spare any future women he might date from a similar fate, but if I'm being honest, it was mostly pure revenge. Naturally, Sophia was utterly opposed. Maybe she wanted to protect me from the consequences of such a thing. More likely, she knew I wouldn't have a chance against him. He'd been an all-state wrestler and outweighed me by 20 pounds. Eventually, we came to a kind of agreement. I wouldn't seek the man out, but if I ever happened to bump into him, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. For many years, whenever we visited her hometown, I felt a surge of adrenaline anytime a man matching his description walked in the door of a restaurant. "Is that him?" I'd ask, and she'd shake her head no. Gradually, we visited Sophia's hometown less often. I never did see the man in person. As far as I know, I'd still have her permission to kill him if I ever bumped into him. "You're right," I told Anselmo after a moment. "We're not the same, and since we're going to be honest, maybe you'd be a better priest if you'd had a couple of rolls in the hay before you put on your collar, even just to know us sinners a little better." He was scratching harder than ever at the back of his head now. "We're not the same," he was shouting now, so loud that Father Thomas began to stir in his seat. "You didn't deserve to capture a lieutenant of hell. You got lucky. You weren't even properly trained. You just finished one last stitch. You're not even a real priest." He practically roared the last word. It had a strange echo, like it had been harmonized by two voices at once. As he spoke, he tore at the back of his skull again, and this time I heard a ripping sound, like flesh unzipping in two. Blood began to accumulate on his shoulders. "Father Anselmo," said Father Thomas quietly, fully awake now. "Please step to the side of the plane. Kneel, fold your hands in prayer." "I'll do no such thing, you meathead," shouted Anselmo. It was clear that two voices were speaking in unison now, his and another deeper one emanating from the back of his skull. Suddenly, without warning, two things happened. Father Thomas began to say a Hail Mary in the original Latin, so fast that the words flowed together in a steady hum. Second, he pelted Father Anselmo with a jar of holy water that exploded as it collided with his chest, sending fragments of pottery and liquid everywhere. Behind me, he shouted between recitations. I stepped back. As I did, the plane shook and I nearly fell. The sky had been cloudless when we took off from LA. Now, dark thunderheads had gathered outside, blotting out the sun and pelting the small windows with rain. Father Anselmo had taken a step back after absorbing the force of the water jar. He also turned 180 degrees, revealing his back to us. There, I saw a bloody face no bigger than a baby's skull protruding just above where his neck met his hairline. The baby's contorted mouth shouted every syllable as Father Anselmo screamed, "There's nowhere to run to, priest. You're trapped up here with me now. This time you're mine." "By Franz the Two-Faced," said Father Thomas, "I thought I recognized your—" Before he could say another word, Father Anselmo Bifrons now charged at him. I realized that in addition to the tiny head, he'd sprouted an extra set of arms and legs, which extended from his elbows and knees and had now grown almost as large as the original ones. The fresh limbs were bare and bloody, glossed with a sheen of mucus like a newborn baby. Bifrons fell on Father Thomas with his full weight, beating at him with the bloody limbs and biting at his face with his fast-growing new head. But Father Thomas had been prepared. Pushing Anselmo to the side with one hand, he took a small silver blade in the other and stabbed it to the hilt into the baby head's right eye. The baby screamed a low growl that seemed to shake the very air inside the plane, and the aircraft dipped again, this time by 100 feet or more, tossing us all off our feet. When I looked back at Father Thomas, his forehead was bleeding from falling against the edge of a chair. Ignoring the injury, he dug into his bag and removed 3 more knives. "Demon of greed," he said, gesturing to the demon. "Bifrons. We can contain him if we seal all 4 eyes. Try to stay back. Let me work." Even as he said it though, I could see him wobbling on his feet. He touched his forehead and the blood was gushing now. "Bad luck, Father Thomas," said Bifrons. "I suspect our next little conversation will be in my place." He charged at Father Thomas again, but the priest was ready. Deftly, he stabbed 2 knives into the eyes that had once been Anselmo's. The demon howled in pain, so loud that my ears began to ring, and I fell to my knees. Outside, the clouds had fully blotted out the sun. Everything seemed to be shaking. I wondered if we were falling into the deep black sea. Tomas fell back now, his head thwopping the ground with an unpleasant crack. He didn't open open his eyes. Across the plane, the demon rose, fixing me in its one remaining eye. The lights shorted in the plane, and the engines went silent. Everything was black, save for the occasional flash of lightning. It seemed to me that I was about to die, or that perhaps I already had. Perhaps the rest of my existence would be like this, surrounded by darkness with the constant feeling of falling, a demon laughing a few feet away. Of course, fear gnawed at me like a family of mice nibbling at my guts. But could I be blamed? Wouldn't anyone be afraid in such a moment? Bad luck for you both, said the thing. At least you'll finally be able to visit your dear wife again. Sophia, isn't it? I hear she's been missing you greatly. At the mention of Sophia's name, reality snapped back to focus. It was as if the plane was holding in midair. Gravity felt somehow lighter. I got to my feet, my fear replaced with simple, blind rage. Suddenly, the thing in front of me wasn't Bifron. It was Sophia's ex. I reached forward and uncurled the final blade from Father Thomas's limp, bloody fingers. I told you not to talk about my wife, I said. I could feel her there with me again. Silently, I asked if our deal was still on, if I could still kill him. I can't be sure, but I think I heard her whisper yes. Now it was my turn to charge forward. My vision narrowed. Through the darkness, all I saw was the one cruel white eye staring at me. I thought of my wife. Then I drove the blade home. On the tarmac in Rome, a man with red robes was waiting for us. I recognized him from a pamphlet I'd once read as Cardinal Robles. He reacted little as he surveyed the bloody scene. The pilot still hadn't left the cockpit. I suspected it was some sort of protocol. Father Thomas lay in my lap, his head bound with a pillowcase I'd fashioned into a makeshift bandage. Both Maya and Anselmo's bodies lay peacefully on the floor, her mouth sealed with thread, his eyes with daggers. After a moment, the cardinal began to laugh. "You'll have to forgive me, Father Matthew," he said. "It's not often that I send my men out to capture one demon, and they come back with two." I coughed up a bit of blood. I wondered when I'd been injured. I didn't feel like laughing. "Enough," he said. "I think we better get these two back home before a third one shows up. What do you say?" I nodded weakly. "We'll get these two to their new accommodations, and then we're going to have a nice long chat," said the cardinal. "I'm starting to think that Saint Michael has big plans for you." I squirmed uncomfortably in the ancient stool, its uneven padding forcing me to sit at a slant. In retrospect, I'm sure Cardinal Robles chose it on purpose. He wanted to see me as uncomfortable as possible. All part of the test. Of course, I was nervous already. As intended, the Grand Chapel's ceiling soaring above us made me feel small. 66 feet above us, God reached out to Adam, granting him life. The metaphor was obvious. I was Adam, waiting for my prize. But what was the Cardinal about to give me? The old man fixed me in his gaze. "What do you know about hell?" he asked after a few moments. I thought back to my training. "Hell is the absence of God," I answered carefully. He smirked. "Good, cautious answer. We like caution here, sometimes. Other times we prefer cojones." He started laughing as if he just made some kind of outrageous joke. The Cardinal had grown up on the streets of Montevideo in Uruguay. He had a reputation for crude jokes. Some people called him direct. Others called him a jerk. I suppose he was both. "Let me rephrase," he said. "Suppose I were to ask you the geography of hell. Could you draw me a map? Could you describe its mountains, its swamps?" I shook my head. "I have never thought of it as a physical place," I answered, still careful. "Of course not," he said. "But you're not so stupid as to deny the connection between the physical and spiritual, correct? Take your little altercation in Los Angeles. You sewed the girl's lips shut, correct? But if that's all you did, there would have been no effect. You were able to quell the demon's hunger because the sewing of the mouth had a metaphorical, spiritual equivalent. Same with the demon's eyes on the plane. Think of Matthew 18:9. And if thine eye causeth thee to stumble, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is good for thee to enter into life with one eye, rather than having two eyes to be cast into the hell of fire." "Now I'm a bit lost," I confessed. The Cardinal rubbed at his temples, clearly disappointed. "Let's try this one more time. Stop being so careful, or I'm sending you back to the States to study under Father David." I shuddered at the thought. Father David was a notorious coward, a priest only fit to deal with minor exorcisms. He had called the Vatican for assistance so many times on major ones that he'd earned the name Father Backup amongst his peers. "Those things you sealed, where do you think they live? Think back to Maya Knowles' house." I closed my eyes and thought back to the house where I'd sewn Maya Knowles' lips shut. I had spent every hour since then trying to block out the smell of blood and colon, the thickness of the air. Suddenly, I found I was speaking almost without trying. "A swamp," I said. "Thick mud, stuff raining from the sky." The Cardinal's eyes lit up. "Yes, yes, more." "Someone are always screaming animal sounds. The air is freezing. There's a constant hail pelting the burning mud. Yes, he shouted, and then he began to recite, "In the third circle I arrive of showers, ceaseless, accursed, heavy and cold, unchanged, forever, both in kind and in degree. Large hail, discolored water, sleety flaw. Through the dun midnight air streamed down amain, stank all the land whereon that tempest fell." I struggled to remember where he was quoting from, certainly not the Bible this time. "Inferno," he said after a moment, looking disappointed. "You're not a literary man?" "I studied engineering in college," I said, "more of a math brain. I do remember something about Dante being non-canonical." He rubbed his temples again. There was something exaggerated about his movements, like Donald Duck losing his cool in an old cartoon. "There are truths in this world that are better kept secret," he said. "The church must act as a shield sometimes, you know, guarding the flock from the fiery darts of the wicked, and so it is with us exorcists." I looked up at him, slightly confused. "I wasn't aware that you were an exorcist yourself. I mean, you're a cardinal." He started laughing. "There's a lot you don't know." He stood, stretching slightly. Then he began to lift the hem of his robe. I looked down to see a deep scar running from his ankle to his knee. "Got that one from a demon of violence named Toru. Everyone was sure I'd lose the leg below the knee. Doctors are idiots, of course." He raised the robe further and turned from me, exposing 4 parallel scars across his back. "Those are from Mammon himself, demon of greed. He got away from me, but not before he left me this little souvenir." He paused, looking up at the ceiling, up at God. "They're demons, you understand. They're different than the minor entities responsible for most possessions. Even what the church calls a major exorcism is really just the minor leagues compared to what we handle. These demons I'm talking about, they are the lords and lieutenants of hell, professional soldiers for the other side. More exorcists will never encounter one over the course of a whole career." "The thing that was inside Maya Knowles," I started to say, "was Lady of Hell, a demon of gluttony, quite powerful. Really, you shouldn't be here today. If things had gone according to the demon's plan, she would have eaten you too, and then consumed her own host body like an Ouroboros, breaking her own arms and legs and swallowing them whole." I was beginning to feel sick, and if I'm going to be honest, I was afraid. Everything I'd known about demons up to that point was suddenly invalid. I thought I'd been a soldier for the church, but now I realized I was playing parlor games with Hell's second stringers. Were the things that had taken Maya and Anselmo the worst things out there, or were there even worse horrors to be discovered? "Why are you telling me all this?" He smacked his head and muttered, "Dios mío." Then he looked up at me. "Isn't it obvious?" he finally asked. "I want to know if you want in. If you want to play in the major leagues, mijo, do you want to fight some real demons with us, or do you want to go back to sprinkling holy water on little kids pretending to be possessed so that they can get more attention from mama?" I thought of the demon slurping Father Anthony's guys through the tiny hole at the side of its mouth. I thought of the baby head sprouting from Father Anselmo's neck, its deep, guttural laugh. I thought of the foul air, the smell of crap. Cardinal Robles held up a hand. "Don't answer yet," he said. "It's enough to know you're considering it. Before your answer, you need to see the reality of what we're up against." He swept his arm out with a flourish. "Follow me. Asterisk. Do you believe in God? Any kind of God?" I looked up at Sophia. It was a bold question for a second date, but she was asking it anyway. Even before I'd asked her out, I'd known Sophia was religious. Not that she was a fanatic or anything, but she went to church most Sundays, which was unusual in our social group. I shrugged, hoping we could deal with the question quickly and move on to another topic. I think at some point, I decided it was one of those big questions that you could never answer, so I stopped asking. I try to spend my time on problems that have solutions. She silently ate a few forkfuls of her salad. "I'm assuming you do," I said, trying to break the awkward silence. "Believe, I mean?" "Well, I don't believe in God," she said after a bit. "Believe implies there'd be a possibility of doubt. I know there's a God, because I know there are demons. I've seen them at work." I topped off my wine and took a drink. This was getting interesting. "What do you mean, seen them?" "This is going to sound crazy, so I'll understand if you get up from the table after a bit and walk out on me. I won't be offended at all. We can still be friends after." I met her eyes. They were deadly serious. "I'm not gonna do that," I said. "You can tell me." Now it was her turn to take a long drink. "When I was younger, 4th grade, I was possessed for a few months," she said. I almost spit out my wine. "I know how it sounds," she continued. "I used to be embarrassed to tell people, but it's part of who I am. There was a demon living inside me. It pushed me to a dark little bubble that I didn't know existed. It was terrifying watching her through a black haze, saying the most vile things to my parents, my sister. I'd always been a good kid, at least that's what I thought. thought, but I must have let her in somehow. She was crying now. For a second, I wondered if I was on a date with an insane person, but when I looked at her, she didn't seem even the least bit crazy. I reached out and took her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said. "It's okay," she said. "The church they sent people, exorcists, it turned out to be something minor," they said. "It didn't feel minor to me, but their prayers made it go away." "I'm sorry," I said again. "What else could I say?" "Don't be," she said. "It was a gift." After that, I didn't have to believe anymore. I knew there was something out there, a bad thing and a good thing. I've gotten to carry that with me every day of my life. Asterisk, I followed Cardinal Robles through a series of rooms and doors, each less grand than the last. Gone were the frescoes and magnificent tapestries. Instead, we weaved through corridors of simple brick. I realized that the architecture too was growing simpler, older. The brickwork was uneven, caked with centuries of grime. The air began to grow cold. Without realizing it, I recognized that we'd been walking slowly downward. There were no windows here or even electric light, just large candles inset into the walls. Of course, everyone knows about the grandeur of the current apostolic palace, but like many things in life, truths lurk beneath the surface that most people never realize. Some of these bricks you're seeing now go all the way back to the 4th century. This was all part of the old St. Peter's Basilica, constructed by Constantine I. He was a convert like you know. The path we followed was winding and haphazard. Without the cardinal there, I wondered if I'd be able to retrace my steps and escape. Escape. That word started to echo in my mind. I realized I didn't like it here. I hated it. Wanted to get out at any cost. Back to the light, the murals, God and Adam. Then something shifted in me. Somewhere not too far away, I felt her presence. It was unmistakably Sophia, as if she just walked behind me in the hall. I turned, sure I'd seen her, but she was gone. It was enough to make me keep walking forward. Finally, we came to a door. "Beyond this door is no return," said the cardinal after a few moments. "Even if you choose not to join us, you will have seen things beyond your imagining, beyond the worst descriptions of Dante or even Revelation." For a moment, I only stared at the door handle. It looked ornate and ancient, filthy from the grime of 1,000 hands of 1,000 priests. Beyond it, I heard something that sounded like the clanking of metal on metal. "Go ahead," said the cardinal. "Open it." I took a step back in revulsion, but when I looked again, I saw now a handle, but a woman's hand, soft and welcoming. I knew who it belonged to, saw the familiar wedding band on the ring finger. I knew somehow that if I went forward, I was moving closer to her. I walked forward and opened the door. We entered a room built of ancient stones. It was perhaps as large as a high school gymnasium, but perfectly round with many doors extending in all directions. To one side sat a man in priest's robes and a thick leather apron. Nearby, a cauldron of molten silver set over a roaring fire. As I watched, the priest said a blessing over the silver, then poured it into a large cross-shaped mold. Soon he was pounding on the surface. Beside him, in neat stacks, lay perhaps 100 such crosses, all neatly stacked. "Why so many?" I asked the cardinal, who only smirked. "You'll soon see." He gestured to the blacksmith, who set aside his hammer for a moment. "Where are the new prisoners? Or just the girl, actually?" asked the cardinal, and the man gestured silently to one of the doors, adorned with gold inlay and flanked by small silver gargoyles. The man resumed his work as we walked to the door and opened it. On the other side, I found out what the crosses were for. In the center of a small, dimly lit room lay a cage. More of a box, really, a 6-foot cube. The whole thing had been built of silver cross, all elaborately connected to form an inescapable grid. Inside lay Maya Knowles. Her eyes were no longer closed, but the stitching still ran across her lips. Both of her wrists were manacled in bracers connected on opposite sides of the cage by silver chains. I gave the cardinal a curious look. "This is like no exorcism I've ever seen," I said. He shook his head. "You misunderstand, Father," he said. "This is no longer an exorcism. Maya, and whoever has infested her, will be here as our permanent guests, unable to cause further mischief in the world." I felt something twist in my stomach. "You have to let her go," I said quietly. "I can get the thing out of her. Together we..." The cardinal shook his head. "You could kill her," he said, "release her that way. But there is no saving Maya Knowles' mortal life, which is why she'll be our guest here for as long as she lives. For as long as the demon is trapped within Maya's mortal coil, it will be unable to hurt another soul." Well, you can't, I said. Maya, she's still in there. She's an innocent. Were she truly innocent, the demon would have never infested her, said the cardinal. Please understand, I know this is a lot to swallow. This is why we work in the basement out of the light. What we do here takes moral courage. The same bravery that Abraham possessed when he stood over Isaac, dagger in hand. Thanks to Maya's sacrifice, dozens of others, possibly hundreds, will be spared a similar fate. She is the true cage, the box of silver crosses that just keeps her in place. As he spoke, Maya looked up at me, her eyes pleading. It's her, I said. Right now it's her, not the demon. It led her to the surface. She's experiencing all of this. Of course, said the cardinal. The demon loves to hide inside. It loves to let her suffer. Maya can't eat like that, I said. Can't drink. She won't live long. The cardinal shook his head. You still don't understand the powers we're facing. With demons of this strength, these lieutenants of hell, the possessed body is essentially immortal. It has no need for sustenance. Maya will still be here long after you and I are both dust. I wanted to fall to my knees and vomit. The cardinal was staring at me hard, trying to read my reaction. Do you need a drink? He asked. Water? Wine? I found I could barely speak. He shook his head, looking disappointed. Do what you must, he whispered. I never claimed it was easy to be a soldier on the front lines. I ignored him and took a step toward Maya. Then suddenly, something compelled me to run to her. I felt around the cage of silver crosses, searching for a hinge that would open or a weak spot on in the soldering. Step away, shouted Cardinal Robles. He was keeping his distance from both of us. You still don't know what you're dealing with, and those restraints aren't built to be permanent. Before he'd even finished his sentence, I heard a horrible cracking sound, and I looked over to see Maya's wrenching her arm against one of the bracers. The arm had clearly broken, and now blood was gushing freely from the places where her bone had pierced her flesh. Quickly, she pulled the broken limb from the bracer and swung her limp forearm in my direction, spraying me with blood. The blood splattered across my face, running down my lips and into my mouth, and I was struck by the sensation that I'd ingested poison. Drink up, priest, the thing inside her shouted before breaking into peals of laughter. I looked around the room, looking for some kind of weapon. I was filled suddenly with a bloodlust like I'd never known. Step back, shouted Cardinal Robles again. This time he grabbed my collar and pulled hard. He was far stronger than he looked, and I found myself clattering against the ground. He rubbed at the bridge of his nose, frustrated. The demon was laughing now, at me, I realized. This is your new soldier, Robles? It asked. He'll be dead before the week is out. As she spoke, blood continued to pour from her open wound. Seeing my eyes fixed on it, she tried to swing it at me again, but this time I was too far away for the blood to hit me. My stomach turned. If I'm going to be honest, I almost pissed myself. In that moment, I realized I couldn't be in the room another second. My instincts took over. I had to leave. The demon cackled as the fear took over, and I ran. Go if you like, called Cardinal Robles, but you can't run from the devil. I was more terrified than I'd ever been in my life, if I'm being honest. Not just of the thing in Maya, but of the cardinal outside the cage, of the whole new reality I'd stumbled into. I ran back to the room with dozens of doors to find the blacksmith back at his work, smoothing out another silver cross. I tried to remember which door I'd come from in the first place, but they all looked basically the same. I walked the circle, fruitlessly searching for some identifying mark, but came up empty. Finally, I just opened one. On the other side was a dark tunnel leading downward. A waft of sulfur hit my nostrils, blowing on a hot wind. I was immediately struck by the certainty that I'd opened a doorway to hell itself. I was about to close it when I heard a voice calling for me. Matthew, it said, is that you? I've been waiting for so long, calling to you, trying to bring you here. I could barely speak. My throat went dry, my vision blurred. Somehow, I still managed to speak her name. Sophia? Matthew? I heard Sophia's voice even more distinctly this time. I was sprinting toward her now as she called my name again and again. The wind in the hallway grew warm, then disappeared, then blew again even hotter, as if some great beast was breathing in the distance. Finally, the hallway ended, terminating in a large chamber built of ancient bricks, all coated in a sheen of wet, where the rocks themselves sweating. Numerous grates lined the stone floor, the hot air wafting up from them and heating my feet through my shoes. In the center of the room, in a cage of silver crosses tarnished from years of neglect, sat Sophia. Matthew, she asked, is it really you? She looked beautiful, better than I remembered. She wore a red silk robe that did nothing to hide her form, and I couldn't help watching the way it fell over her body. She certainly looked better than she'd looked on the slab at the morgue the last time I'd seen her, her face bloodied from slamming against the steering wheel, her neck bent at an impossible angle. I knew what I was seeing was impossible, and yet for a brief moment, just a second, I wanted it so badly to be true that I let myself believe it was. "Come to me, my love," she said. "There must be some way for you to get me out of here." I found myself looking around for a rock, a crowbar, some forgotten piece of metal I would use to smash her cage to pieces. As I looked, we both heard footsteps, fast approaching down the hall. "Never mind that," she said. "Just come closer. Kiss me through the cage. Let me taste your lips just one more time." I hesitated now. There was something different about her skin. It was rippling a bit with a silver sheen. My desire began to mix with fear. I imagined pressing my lips through a hole in the cage only for her to bite them off. I imagined the blood running down my face as she cackled, my flesh dangling from her lips. "Now," she said, and her voice was lower than before. I lifted my right foot from its place on the ground, preparing to step toward her. As I did, she shrugged off the silk dress, revealing her naked body. I felt myself harden in a way I hadn't in years, since she died and I'd given myself to God. Careful not to touch the silver cage, she moved closer to me, just barely not touching the metal. "Come," she said. I lowered my foot to the ground. "The scar," I said after a moment. "The burn on your shoulder, it's not there anymore." "And I'm whole now," she said. "I'm perfect." "You're not her," I said, tears pouring down my face. And as I spoke the words, her skin began to shimmer silver, and I saw her for what she was. A woman wrapped head to toe in roughly made sacks. The bags were made of coarse cloth with silver threaded through, and bound tightly at the neck, wrists, and ankles with thicker silver rope. Before I could speak another word, she lunged forward, lurching against the side of the cage. There was a sizzling sound from where she threw her shoulder against the metal, and she screamed in pain, her voice more like a chorus than a single woman's howl. I staggered back and fell on the slick, wet ground. "You see it then for what it is?" asked Cardinal Robles, approaching from behind me. I nodded. "She has had many names, but she's known mostly as Abazo," said Cardinal Robles. "You can call me Abby if you like," said the thing in the cage. She had retreated to the center now, away from the lattice of silver crosses. "Since we're so close and all, we were just about to have a little moment, weren't we, Maddie?" "You don't know a thing about me," I said, but she started laughing. Then she held up her hand, which was bound inside the cloth bag. She pulled at it with her opposite hand, revealing the outline of a missing finger. "They didn't get all of me in here," she said. "There was a piece I'd left out in the world. Ask them where I left it, Maddie. Ask them where it was. How do you think I've been calling to you all this time? How do you think I know you so well?" I looked over at Cardinal Robles, who slowly nodded. "There's much to explain, but not here." He looked agitated. Walking over to a small hole in the wall, he shouted down, his voice echoing, "Tell someone that the holy water needs a fresh blessing." Then he smiled again and turned back to me. "Natural hot springs," he said, gesturing to the vents. "You bless the water and voila, keeps them nice and docile most of the time. Now come on, before she tries to dress up like your high school crush and gets you worked up all over again." And slowly I backed away, following the cardinal out of the room. The whole time the demon's eyes didn't leave me. Beneath the bag covering her head, I saw her tongue poking out, forming a small wet spot. "See you again soon," she said, "sooner than you think." And when she said the words, I believed her, and I was terrified, because for the first time I truly believed a demon had seen my soul and known the weak places in it, because I knew I was imperfect. Abazal called after us as we ascended through the dreary maze. At first it was my name, over and over again. Then it became more of a guttural moan, some sort of cross between pleasure and pain. Even knowing what she was, it took everything in me not to turn back and run to her. "You're trembling, Father Matthew," said Cardinal Robles. "But is it your body or your faith that's shaking?" "I'll be fine," I said, still unable to control the palsy. I was still trying to digest everything the demon had said. "Is it true," I finally asked, "that she left a piece of herself somewhere? What did she mean?" "Search your heart," he said. Asterisk. About a year into our marriage, I woke to find Sophia missing from bed. I got up and walked down the hall. The house was utterly silent. Then, beneath the silence, I heard a sharp intake of breath, the sound you make when you're doing everything in your power not to cry out. Coming down the stairs, I saw a light on in Sophia's sewing room. I heard the sound again, and I called Sophia's name, but there was no response. Finally, I came to the doorway of the room and looked inside. There sat my wife, a half-finished quilt on her lap. I recognized it as one she'd been working on earlier that day, a blue and white pattern inspired by old Dutch Delftware, except now a deep red had soaked through. "Sophia?" I asked, but she didn't respond. She was doing something with her left hand, picking at it maybe, pressing missing something? I took a step forward. She inhaled, gritting her teeth, trying not to scream. Then I saw the needle. It was a large one, perhaps 4 or 5 inches long. She had inserted the pointed end into the palm of her hand and was pressing on it now, pushing it deeper and deeper into the skin. As I watched, she pushed with all of her strength, and the needle made a tent of the flesh on the opposite side of her hand before finally piercing through, the blood blooming red around it. She sighed in relief now, tears coming to her eyes. "Sophia," I screamed, running to her, and something seemed to flash on in her eyes. "What are you doing?" "I got 3 stitches wrong," she said quietly. 3 in a row. I had to punish myself. "We need to call a doctor," I said. She was crying now. "There's something wrong inside me," she said. "Something it left behind. It won't come out. It's been there so long, it's all tangled up. It's a part of me now, forever and ever." I was still looking at the needle, trying to decide if I should pull it out or wrap it in cloth before I called 911. "They thought they got it out, but they didn't," she said. "Not all of it." Asterisk, I was nearly hyperventilating as we continued our ascent. The memory of the needle had flooded through my mind all at once. Of course, Sophia had many such episodes. It wasn't exactly that I'd forgotten them, but they were compartmentalized, kept separate from the Sophia I wanted to remember. At the same time, I was well aware that Sophia had been possessed once, and that it had left its scars on her forever after. If I'm being honest, half the reason I joined the clergy was to exact some measure of revenge on the demons that had hurt her. "Wait," I said, "so you're saying that demon, that was the one who—" "Abazu possessed your wife when she was a young girl," said the cardinal. "We sent 2 of our best exorcists. At first the demon fought to stay in. Then, just before they could perform the ritual of binding, the demon escaped back to hell. Apparently she left a bit of herself behind inside your wife." He wiggled a pinky in explanation. "I thought of the thing in the cage, the missing finger under the cloth bag. After that, Abazu possessed another girl in South Korea," he went on, "then a young mother in Australia, a grandmother in Spain. She would use their flesh to fulfill certain desires before discarding the bodies. She moved quickly. In each of those cases, we couldn't catch her fast enough. Our priests arrived to find corpses. Finally, she grew bold and tried to possess a nun in Milan. That time, I went personally and bound her before the demon could escape. Now Abazu remains in the nun's body, caged up as you saw her. She won't hurt another soul." As he spoke the last words, he opened a door, and we entered a light-filled room where the air no longer smelled of sweat. For the first time in hours, I felt I could breathe. "Now you understand, I hope, the need for what we do," he said. I nodded weakly. "The question is," he said, "now that you know everything, do you want to join us?" I nodded again, but with more confidence this time. "I want to catch as many of these bastards as we can," I said. "I want to fill this dungeon."
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.